This reading is about Pueblo Bonito culture, located in Chaco Canyon, New Mexico. In the thumbnail, you will see the view of Pueblo Bonito, which shows the semicircular plan of the site with a central plaza, which is divided by a wall and flanked by rooms and circular kivas. And kivas are just subterranean circular chambers, which are found particularly on sites in the American Southwest. Beginning around CE 700, there's evidence for an increased level of social complexity, again, complexity without the state, across the American Southwest. In the arid deserts of southern Arizona, sites with platform mounds and ball courts have been attributed to the Hohokam culture. The largest Hohokam site is Snaketown. It is located in the Phoenix Basin, and at the height of its development in the 11th century, respectively, Snaketown had a population of 300 to 600 people, and 2 large ball courts. The Hohokam developed large-scale irrigation projects to pull water from the Salt and Gila rivers to agricultural fields. The ancestral Puebloan cultures flourished in what is now known as the Four Corners region, where Arizona, New Mexico, Utah, and Colorado meet. Beginning around 800 CE, Chaco Canyon in the San Juan Basin, New Mexico, became the center of a regional settlement network and the site of the construction of spectacular multi-storied structures known as great houses. Understanding the organization of Chaco society and the function of the Chaco Great Houses is one of the most exciting challenges in the study of the prehistory of North America. The current environment of Chaco Canyon does not exactly correspond to most people's concept of Eden. Chaco Canyon covers an area of 30 kilometers and between about half a kilometer to 1 kilometer wide, and is between 90 and 180 meters deep. Rainfall, vegetation, surface water, and game are all very sparse. The inhabitants of the canyon responded to this challenging environment by developing dams and canals in order to control runoff water from torrential summer rains. Again, Pueblo Bonito is a massive 650-room complex, the largest great house in Chaco Canyon. Concerning the development of Pueblo Bonito, it is a massive multi-story complex of 650 rooms covering almost 2 acres. It is the largest great house in Chaco Canyon. The rooms are arranged in a semicircle, enclosing a central plaza, which is divided roughly in half by a wall running in a north to south direction. The rooms that make up the great house include a large number of subterranean circular chambers known as kivas, which are structures that have religious significance in modern Pueblo villages. Archaeological research at Pueblo Bonito has demonstrated that the massive great house was built over centuries. The excellent preservation of wooden beams in the dry environment of Chaco Canyon has allowed archaeologists to use dendrochronology, or tree ring dating, to develop a tight sequence of events. The construction of Pueblo Bonito began around 1,200 years ago, or around CE 800, and the complex reached its full size of development over the next 200-300 years, and so around 1000 CE to 1100 CE. Subsequently, there was a reduction in the extent of occupation, and building activity slowed before the site was abandoned around 750 years ago, or a precise date of CE 1250. The function of Pueblo Bonito. Archaeologists working at Pueblo Bonito have struggled to determine the function of this impressive site. From Neitzel in 2003. The construction of a complex of 100 rooms or hundreds of rooms suggests that the site was a very large settlement, and population estimates for the site have ranged as high as 1,200 people. However, excavations have uncovered a surprisingly small number of fireplaces and very few remains of domestic activities. These observations, coupled with the layout of the site and the large number of kivas, have led some to argue that Pueblo Bonito was essentially a ceremonial center and that it rarely had a population of much more than 100 people at a time. And so 2 large mounds of cultural debris and earth reaching 6 meters in height and located in front of the plaza are a pertinent source of information concerning the function of Pueblo Bonito. Similar mounds, known as berms, are a common feature of great houses from the Chaco period. A unique feature of the Pueblo Bonito berms is that they were, in fact, plastered, so they could have served as a platform for ceremonies. Excavation of the berms here and at other sites has produced massive quantities of ceramics. The types of vessels found suggest that they are the refuse of ceremonial feasting, rather than that of normal daily activities. The function of Pueblo Bonito might also have changed over time. Its initial occupation conforms to the size and organization of a residential site. It is possible that between 800 and 1,000 it was the residence of an elite group. With the expansion around 1,000, the focus of the site shifted toward ceremonial function. Of course, it is possible that throughout its occupation, Pueblo Bonito served as both an elite residence and as a ceremonial center. It appears that at 1000 CE, the balance of activity shifted toward the ceremonial aspect. The connection between an elite residence and a ceremonial center indicates that the elite's power was at least partly the result of their special role in religious ceremonies. For example, we can find pottery in the form of a human head from room number 38 at Pueblo Bonito. The evidence for elites and the sheer scale of the construction at Pueblo Bonito suggests some form of political leadership. And to get a sense of the size of this undertaking, consider that over 200,000 trees were used in order to make the floors and the roofs of the great house. One estimate places the amount of labor involved in its construction at around 800,000 person-hours. Archaeological evidence for social inequality at Pueblo Bonito is restricted largely to the finds that are made in 2 small rooms at the north end. Although a number of rooms at the site included burial remains, those at room 33 are unique. Here, the disarticulated remains of 16 individuals was found above a wooden plank floor. Below the floor, 2 male burials were found together with lavish offerings. Altogether, the burial offerings found in room 33 included over 50,000 pieces of turquoise in the form of beads, pendants, and mosaic inlays. Such a concentration of turquoise is unknown in any contemporary context. Not far away, in room 38, a rich deposit of beads, pendants, and mosaic pieces made of jet, which is a hard black stone, was discovered as well. Although no human burials were found in room number 38, it also contained 14 skeletons of macaws, colorful birds that were native to the Gulf of Mexico. The discoveries in rooms 33 and room 38 at Pueblo Bonito make it clear that wealth was not equally distributed among the members of society. It is interesting that turquoise, jet, and macaws were traded over very long distances. The concentration of large quantities of these objects in 2 rooms suggests that the elite of Pueblo Bonito society exercised some degree of control over the trade networks. Studies of residues on pottery vessels for Pueblo Bonito and other southwestern cities have found very prevalent evidence for drinking cacao and Ilex vomitoria, which is a variety of holly used to make a caffeinated drink. In analysis, the residues using a mass spectrometer, 3 chemical compounds, methylaxine, theobromine, and caffeine were detected. Cacao is a native substance to Mesoamerica, and Ilex vomitoria is located to the southwest, so both had to be traded into Cacao Canyon. It is likely that these stimulating drinks would have been consumed in a communal ritual context. The Cacoan Network. The large number of trade items found in rooms 33 and 38 at Pueblo Bonito indicates that the site was part of a larger network. Within Cacao Canyon, archaeologists have identified a system of roads that connect the great houses. Research using satellite imagery has provided clear evidence that the system of roads stretched far beyond the limits of the canyon. A series of photographs taken by NASA with a thermal infrared multispectral scanner, or TIMS, detected over 200 miles of roads radiating out from Cacao Canyon. The road system links Cacao Canyon with sites covering a large part of what is today the Four Corners region of the American Southwest. Again, when we talk about the Four Corners region, what we're really talking about is those four states which find their connection in this one canyon. And sites in this region tend to share similarities in architecture, which together with the road system suggests that they were linked into what is being called the Cacoan network. Although Cacao Canyon was clearly the center of this network, there is no evidence that the people that lived there had control over the outlying settlements. However, more than just high-status trade items such as turquoise, jet, and macaws floated to the great houses at Cacao, it has long been recognized that much of the pottery recovered at Cacao Canyon was not produced locally, but was in fact brought to the site from outlying areas in the Cacoan network. A study of maize kernels suggests that some of the food that was consumed in this canyon was not grown locally, but was brought from without. By looking at the isotopes of the element strontium in maize kernels found at Cacao Canyon, researchers have shown that at least some of the maize was grown in areas of over 80 kilometers away from the actual site itself. The riddle of the Cacoan network is what made it run? What compelled people to bring food and pottery into this canyon from surrounding areas? And what gave the people that were living at Pueblo Bonito the ability to control large quantities of high-status trade items? One possibility is that these items were brought to the canyon as taxes collected by a central authority, backed by the threat of force. The problem with such a scenario, however, is that there is no evidence of such an authority or even of very large populations in this canyon. Another possibility is that the power of the people living at this canyon was the result of the centrality of the canyon in the ritual and the religious life of the people living within the greater Cacoan network. The flow of goods into this canyon might have been the result of cycles of ceremonial feasting in which large groups of people congregated in the canyon for very brief periods of time, bringing from their home food and utensils that were then discarded in the refuse piles, such as the berm in front of Pueblo Bonito. And again, the Cacoan network is simply a road system and it links Cacao Canyon with sites covering a more larger part of what is actually today the Four Corners region of the American Southwest. Before talking about the rise and fall of the Cacao Canyon, I do want to talk a little bit about remote sensing. Methods of remote sensing, including aerial and satellite photography, have played a critical role in discovering sites and orienting exploration in the field of archaeology. Satellite imagery can cover large geographical regions, and in recent years, methods of satellite imagery have come to rely heavily on sensors that detect features visible to the human eye. Radar imaging from satellites is able to detect large-scale buried features. And in research in the Eastern Sahara Desert, archaeologists have used spatial radar images to trace the remains of buried river systems associated with Paleolithic sites. And in the field of archaeology and historical research, we find a lot of these underground cultures from aerial view that could not be seen from terrestrial land. Some sensors can detect minute variations in the surface temperature of the Earth, and it thus provides an index of the characteristics of the soil. For example, a photograph taken by NASA could be used, and by using a thermal infrared multispectral scanner, TIMS, it can show roads that radiate out from the actual canyon itself. Or we could see an aerial photograph of Guatacondo in the Atacama Desert of Chile from around 200 to 500 CE, and you will notice that in the photo how structures have not been excavated but yet are visible in the photograph. In Cacao Canyon, New Mexico, a thermal infrared multispectral scanner, again TIMS, flown by NASA was used to detect a road system dated to between 900 and 1000 CE. Photography from aircraft or balloons can actually reveal buried features, raised mounds, or even wall systems. Most of these aerial photographs that are used by archaeologists are taken at an oblique angle in order to further enhance the visibility of these features. Aerial photographs are particularly useful in giving a view of an area that would otherwise be too large to excavate. Photographs of ancient cities often have revealed the complete urban plan, including roads and fortification walls, and this is extensively helpful in regards to historical research. Aerial photographs have even been used successfully in making the outlines of ancient field systems visible to archaeologists and historians. And in a small number of cases, aerial photography has revealed construction on a grand scale that is too large to be seen from the actual ground itself. Most spectacular of these types of construction are the Nazca lines in Peru, which consist of representations of animals which are made by clearing paths on the desert floor. The form of these alignments is visible only from the air itself and cannot be detected from the ground. In recent years, archaeologists have begun to use airborne LiDAR to map out landscapes that are covered by vegetation. LiDAR uses radar in order to penetrate below the vegetation cover to produce a map of the ground surface. This method has already had a significant impact on our understanding of the Maya cities, for example, and the structure of Angkor Wat. Back to the rise and fall of Cacao Canyon, the location of the elaborate structures like Pueblo Bonito in the highly arid environment of Cacao Canyon in New Mexico has led archaeologists to look for a connection between fluctuations in climate and the rise and fall of the great houses. The relationship between climate and the end of the occupation of these houses is cogent and direct. A devastating drought beginning in 1130 CE made continuing intensive occupation untenable. As a result, construction of these great houses came to an end and occupation was abandoned. By the time the drought had ended, however, the Cacoan network had collapsed, and Cacao Canyon never regained its central role. The link between climate and the rise of the canyon is more complex than the actual connection between climate and the end of its occupation. A number of archaeologists have suggested that the Cacoan network developed as a means of buffering risk in an uncertain environment. Given the low rainfall in the region around the canyon, there was always a risk of local crop failure. If each group lived in isolation, then the crop failure would lead to starvation. However, if groups were linked throughout by a network in which exchange regularly took place, any group that experienced the failure of its crops could trade for food with other members of the network whose crops had not failed. And of course, the extensive network and the existence of this network for the redistribution of food and other goods thus acted as a buffer zone between the uncertain environment and local communities. Lynn Sebastian, in 1992, has argued that this explanation for the rise of Cacao Canyon is wrong. She pointed out that the great houses were built during a period with relatively high rainfall. And so why would a buffering mechanism develop when climate pressures were reduced? As an alternative, she indicates that during the periods beginning around 1000 CE, there was an increase in annual rainfall, which allowed for an agricultural surplus. The accumulation of these surpluses in the lands of local elites led to a cycle of competition. The elaborate construction at Pueblo Bonito and the concentration of rare trade goods such as turquoise and jet are expressions of this competition. And it is the existence of an agricultural surplus rather than the threat of agricultural failure that led to the spectacular developments in Chaco Canyon and possibly elites trading for these very rare items. Summing up the evidence of the material culture, the great houses of Cacao Canyon were the hub of an extensive Cacoan network. Whether this network was a buffer zone against stress or the result of surplus production remains the subject of debate. But regardless, excavations at Pueblo Bonito have demonstrated that there was a considerable concentration of wealth in the hands of an elite. This wealth included trade goods drawn from a very large area, brought from without, and at the same time, excavations indicate that the great houses were not densely settled towns, but rather ceremonial centers that were probably permanently occupied only by a small group or a handful of individuals, around 100 or so at a time. Given the effort expended in the construction of the great houses, the concentration of wealth and burials, and the evidence for the influx of goods to Chaco Canyon from the Cacoan network, it is clear that the leaders of this society were extremely powerful, yet without the foundation of a state. However, there is no evidence that their power rested on the monopolization of force. One possibility is that the power of the leaders flowed from the centrality of the canyon itself in ritual and ceremony. And now we'll talk about, in the next video, we'll talk about Cahokia and Great Zimbabwe.